Hi, welcome to New Hampshire Politics and Policy, the show where we talk about all things political, especially from a Democratic perspective. I'm State Senator Cindy Rosenwald from Nashua, and with me today is State Rep first-time candidate William Bill Dolan. You go by Bill, but
I go by
formally
Bill,
by William.
but William is my name. That is the name on the ballot, but Bill is my nickname.
And you're a candidate for the House in Ward 5.
Yes, I'm a candidate for state representative in Nashville, Ward 5.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Great to talk with you. So tell me a little bit about yourself. I know you're a criminal defense lawyer.
Yes, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I have an office in Nashua, in Spitbrick Road, and I also have an office in Lowell, Massachusetts. I practice in both Middlesex County in Massachusetts, primarily also Suffolk County, which is Boston. And then I practice in Hillsborough County. I try generally not to go further than Manchester.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah, it's a pretty wide stretch between Boston and Manchester, right?
And a lot of people.
Yes, and a lot of people. So yes, I'm a criminal defense attorney in both states.
And so when you think about public policy in your professional area, any particular issues that you're very passionate about?
Well, I think in terms of criminal justice reform, in New Hampshire specifically, I think that recently I've seen some attempts to pull back on some of the bail reform measures that were taking not too long ago. And I'm a little upset at some of the rhetoric that I've heard, even from a couple of Democrats. And I think that sort of what is being pushed by the other side is that because of the bail reform, that people that are violent are just simply being let out of jail to continue to commit crimes and never be held accountable by the criminal justice system, or to be stopped by being held pretrial. And that's just simply not true. I mean, New Hampshire has a preventative detention statute that is used in lieu of bail, so somebody can be held without bail. The purpose of the bail reforms were to stop things like people being held for months on pretrial in pretrial detention, Valley Street, in this county at least, for simple misdemeanors that they would have get probation for, or probation, drug treatment, or whatever it may be, and they're being held in jail for $100. And that's what bail reform was meant to stop.
So it costs almost that every day to keep them at Valley Street.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's the government funds that are being used to keep them there, and on top of that, there are social ills that are created. And if somebody should be held if they're dangerous,
Yeah, of course,
but not because they simply don't have the money to pay. That's not the country that we have. That's not the system we have. And let's not forget, these are other citizens that are accused of crimes that have not been convicted. So we have somebody who may lose their job. They may lose custody of their children. And then we are asked, if they're found guilty or if they take a plea, we then ask them to get back up on their feet. And then we penalize them when they need a little bit extra help that the court system can't provide because it's not a social welfare system.
So if there are two people arrested for the same misdemeanor, let's say, one who can afford bail gets out, and somebody previous to the bail reforms could have been held in jail simply because they couldn't make bail, just because they were poor?
That is the previous system. And I think that New Hampshire has made great strides. I mean, I think that the clients of mine that are held under preventative detention because the state has made a showing that, and the judges agreed, that they're not able to be released.
Because they'd be dangerous.
According to the prosecution and according to the judge. I'm their attorney, and that's my job to defend them.
But that's the metric they're looking at.
Exactly. Either they're a danger to themselves or a danger to the community. And I think that, as looking at it from I was being a legislator, I agree with that. I mean, I'm also a citizen too, and I think that there should be restraints on people's liberty pre-trial if a certain threshold is met. They're given an attorney, and they're just like me, and the attorney can make the best argument for them to be released. Obviously, it's likely what people would want. And that's the system we have, and I think that's a system that should stay in place. And I think that attempts to dial that back are just simply incorrect. And I think there's just been just so much misunderstanding and misinformation on that issue. So that's something that I think I could bring to the legislature in terms of providing that experience and clarifying and pointing to the statute, the preventative detention statute, and
Right.
saying, no, we actually do have something and it's used. I would welcome legislatures to come hang out in court, come watch the arraignment session, see the types of crimes where someone is allowed to have bail and the ones where they're not. So I think issues like that are important to me, and I can bring a certain perspective that others might not have.
But what other issues besides criminal justice system have motivated you to run?
Sure. I come from a very lower economic background. I come from a single mother. I had a twin sister, and it was just me, my sister, and my mom. My grandmother was there a lot. God bless her soul. And I think of the children that go to school in Ward 5 at any ward in Nashua or any school in the state as possibly me. And I remember, I took advantage of certain opportunities that were there. And I just wonder what would have happened had those opportunities not been there for me. So I want to bring those opportunities to the children that were like me. And I think that we should invest in education. There seems to be this conversation that it's a waste of money and that we should be fiscally responsible. I think it is fiscally responsible to invest in education, to invest in infrastructure. So we should emphasize STEM beginning in kindergarten. STEM. We absolutely should. I think that I see things like commuter rail from an economic perspective. I think that creating a commuter rail from Nashua to Boston connects Nashua to the metropole that is Boston, to higher paying jobs that you can live here and work in Boston.
Or the other way around.
Or the other way around.
Right.
The other way around. That's very true. I think that, and I'm also a nerd. So I
embrace it, lean into it.
Oh, mine as well. I mean, it got me where I am. I mean, I have a master's in business administration. I have an MBA as well. I went to I did a dual graduate program.
At UMass?
Suffolk University in Boston. I went to Sawyer Business School there and to Suffolk Law School. So in a nerdy way, I have a background in infrastructure. I worked on academic projects in terms of high-speed rail in Brazil. I have an academic background in terms of the economic advantages to certain infrastructure. This would not be high-speed rail. That's not what's being proposed in New Hampshire. But there are economic benefits to the commuter rail. And I think this is one example of how I differentiate between myself and the Republicans, because the Republicans seem to talk about, no, don't spend money. Spending money is somehow a waste to them. No, we need to be smart about it. And what's the biggest bang for your buck? Commuter rail, connecting us to Boston and vice versa. And I think that we should do that. I think it's an absolute no-brainer. And
well, I think that's why the business community understands the benefits of bringing that rail line up from Lowell.
Yeah, to connect it. I mean, I think there's also something, too, that I like to talk about with the commuter rail. I mean, I remember being a kid, and I remember, any one of my generation, the generations before, probably up to this day, remembers taking the commuter rail at 13, 14 years old with your friends, sometimes with permission of adults, maybe sometimes not.
Okay.
And you would get your, $10 for your ticket, and back then it was $10 it was like $5 apiece.
For a round trip.
And you would go into Boston, and your world would just explode.
I grew up outside of New York City, and I had the same exact experience. By the time I was a teenager, I could get on the train on weekends, and I could go into New York City and visit friends. And it was a huge world. I could go to a museum or a movie or Central Park. It's just a new world.
I don't think, like I said, I come from a lower economic background. I don't think people appreciate really what it's like to go to a city like Boston and be from the outskirts. And to go there and see it sounds corny, but the bright lights and wow. I mean, I took the commuter rail to go to undergrad. While living not even close to Boston. I bought my first piece of real estate, my first home when I was 22. And I was not going to commute to Boston or not going to move to Boston, so I had to commute. And I think that was something that provided me the opportunity to get that education while still be able to afford the mortgage that I had. I had to juggle everything.
You must have been working.
Yes. I've worked all my life. And I've put hard work in. And I think even with that hard work, had I not been given certain opportunities, whether it be in school or just happening to get the right person to pay attention to whatever skill that I had, I don't think I'd be here. And I think that's just unfair, because there are plenty of people. If you go to Valley Street right now, there are plenty of bright people. That's the jail in Manchester.
No, I've been there.
There are plenty of bright people up there. And they're human beings like us. They were not born to be put in a cage. That's not, and no one is born like that. And I think that we forget that as normal citizens, right? That, there is some, at least personally, I guess I cannot talk for everybody. It'd be arrogant of me to say that. But I know that there are opportunities that were just there that I took advantage of. And I think that being put into a role as a legislator, I want to create those opportunities and pass it forward and create more people that could go from where I went from to law school, to business school, to owning a business, to employing people, to paying payroll, to providing opportunities, for going in there and slugging it out, to make sure that someone leaves that courtroom and goes home and is there for their children, and we can fight their case later, instead of being in Valley Street. So I want to provide those opportunities for people.
I think that is the experience of so many people, and it's what I think we all want is America, the land of opportunity. I mean, that's the value that I think Americans really have always shared.
Yeah, and we seem to forget that. And I think that there's a lot of political division at the moment, but, I think in the end, I'm not sure who disagrees with that, right? I mean, I think we sometimes get confused, and we think, we just take whatever emotions we have and we blame the other side. And I think this country is politically divided for a reason. But I do think there is some confusion there, and people, in the end, I think most people just want a better America for their children, just better opportunities. I don't know who doesn't. Who would say that?
Right. So in the couple minutes we have left, you're knocking doors. What are you hearing from people in Ward 5?
I'm hearing
worried about.
I think the way to summarize it is, I think rising cost. And I don't speak from an outsider at this perspective. I live in Ward 5. My electric bill is doubled. Doubled. Not 50%, 100%. I know what it is normally. I have tracked it over a couple of years. I know what it is. I know it rises in the summer. We're running the ACs. And I find that ridiculous. How is that even possible? How is it that you can, why? That's just unacceptable. I think that there are a lot of people that are worried about the new tax assessments that have come out. I've heard a lot of people talk about that. They've seen the property assessments of their homes go up, and they're worried that taxes are going to go up. And I don't blame them. I got that same notice as a sticker shock. And
I did too.
I think it's something that should be better explained, because in the end, what I've been told is that the rate will come down to keep taxes just about the same.
Well,
but that should have been explained. That was not in that little letter, right? So I think many of the people that I talked to, I had one guy go and get the letter and say, "What is this?" and wanted to blame me for it.
So if people want to know more about you, just quickly, we've got about 30 seconds. How can they contact you or find out more?
So I have a website, dolan4rep.com. So that's DOLANFORREP.com. Or you can find me on Twitter, Dolan4repNH. So direct message me on Twitter, check out my website, and thank you very much for having me.
Well, thanks. You've been watching New Hampshire Politics and Policy. I'm Cindy Rosenwald. Thanks for joining us today.